Perhaps, Sadao said with difficulty. And now I think you had better go back to bed. Now, why he said this with difficulty? Because he was not what the white American was thinking about him. He was planning quietly to have him killed. So it was very difficult for him to accept that he was a very good Japanese and there wouldn't have been a war had all the Japanese been like him. He helped the boy back into bed and then bowed. "Good night," he said. Sadao slept badly that night. Why? Because he was expecting those assassins. Time and time again he woke, thinking he heard the rustling of footsteps, the sound of a twig broken or a stone displaced in the garden, a noise such as men might make who carried a burden. So, whenever he heard any sound, he felt as if someone was walking on the dried leaves. There was a rustling sound or a sound of breaking of a twig or stone getting moved, as if someone was carrying some burden and walking. The next morning, he made the excuse to go first into the guest room. If the American were gone, he then could simply tell Hannah that so the general had directed. So he, on some excuse, went to the American's room first, and he had thought that if the American was not there, he would tell Hannah that the general had directed him to do like this. But when he opened the door, he saw at once that there on the pillow was the shaggy blonde head. Shaggy, long, thick, unkept hair, blonde head. He could hear the peaceful breathing of sleep and he closed the door again quietly. "He is asleep," he told Hannah. "He is almost well to sleep like that." So the young American was sleeping very soundly, very peacefully. So anybody who has gained health, who is in reasonably good health, could sleep like that. So he told Hannah that he is almost well for sleeping this way. "What shall we do with him?" Hannah whispered, her old refrain. Hannah asked, she whispered, "What shall we do with him?" This was her old refrain. Sadao shook his head. "I must decide in a day or two," he promised. So he promised her that within a day or two he will decide what they are going to do with him. But certainly, he thought, the second night must be the night. So he was actually waiting for the assistance the general had promised. There rose a wind that night, and he listened to the sounds of bending bows and whistling partitions. So the next day, the second night was quite windy, and so he listened to the sound of bending bows and whistling partitions, the different sounds the wind makes. Hannah woke up. Hannah woke too. "Ought we not to go and close the sick man's partition?" she asked. So Hannah woke too. He was not able to sleep as it is because of the sounds, because of the wind sounds, and he had in his mind, he was actually expecting the assassins. That is why he was not able to sleep. So Hannah woke too. Even she got up. And she asked that, "Ought we not to go and close the sick man's partition?" "No," Sadao said. "He is able now to do it for himself." But the next morning, the American was still there. Then the third night, of course, must be the night. Now he was very eagerly waiting. He could not sleep because in his subconscious mind, he knew the assassins are going to come. The wind changed to quiet rain, and the garden was full of sound of dripping eaves and running springs. Now, when rain falls, the water drips from the roof, from the edges of the roof, and It flows continuously like springs. Sadao slept a little better. Now he must have been very tired. He was not able to sleep for 2 nights. So on the third night he fell asleep. But he woke at the sound of a crash. But when he heard a sound of a crash, he woke up and leaped to his feet. He jumped out of his feet. What was that? Hannah cried. The baby woke at her voice. Now, when she cried, what was that? The baby also woke because she had spoken this quite loudly and began to wail. The baby began to cry. I must go and see. But he held her and would not let her move. So thou held her hand and he did not let her move. Why? Because he thought the Assassins might be killing the white man, or maybe they are carrying him out. So he did not want Hannah to see all that. So he was holding her very tightly. Sadao, she cried, what is the matter with you? She could not understand why he was holding her like that. Don't go, he muttered. Don't go. His terror infected her. Now he was full of terror. He was terrorized. He was very afraid. And that terror got into her also, infected her. That means it was transferred to her also. And she stood breathless, waiting. There was only silence. Together they crept back into the bed, the baby between them. When he did not let her go and she saw his terror, even she was terrified, and with the result she also did not go, and they both got into the bed and the baby in between them. Yet, when he opened the door of the guest room in the morning, there was the young man. He was very gay and had already washed and was now on his feet. He was very happy and very cheerful, gay, cheerful, and he had washed, he had changed, and now he was on his feet. He had asked for a razor yesterday and had shaved himself, and today there was a faint color in his cheeks. So he had shaved also, and his cheeks were not all that pale, there was some color in his cheeks. I am well, he said joyously. Very happily, he said, I am well. Sadao drew his kimono round his very body. He could not, he decided suddenly, go through another night. It was not that he cared for this young man's life. No, simply it was not worth the strain. So Sadao, he drew his kimono, the dress that they wear, round his very body, tired body. He was exasperated also. He was tired also. He was sick because he had been waiting for 2-3 nights and still the general's assassins did not turn up. He could not, he decided suddenly, go through another night. Now he could not have another stressful night waiting for the assassins. It was not that he cared for this young man's life. It was not that he cared for this young man's life or this American's life. No, simply it was not worth the strain. All this was a very great strain on him, which he thinks was not worth it. You are well, Sadao agreed. He lowered his voice. You are so well that I think if I put my boat on the shore tonight, with food and extra clothing in it, you might be able to row to that little island not far from the coast. So he says that you are so well that if I put a boat on the shore and put some food and extra clothing in it, you might be able to row the boat to the nearby island. It is so near the coast that it has not been worth fortifying. That means there were no guards on this island because the island was very near. Everything was visible. It was very near, so they had not put any guards there. Nobody lives on it because in storm it is submerged. No one lives there because it is low-lying, and when there is storm, the whole island gets submerged. It goes under the water. The water comes over it. But this is not the season of storm, and this is not the season of storm, so it won't get submerged. You could live there until you saw a Korean fishing boat. You can stay there till you see a Korean fishing boat pass by. They pass quite near the island because the water is many fathoms deep there. He says that the fishing boats they pass quite near the shores of that island because the water at the edges at the coast is very deep. It's very deep, so boats pass very close to the island.